Hello, people. This is Ganesha Prishti again with the biology class for you. In the last class, we studied about the characteristics of living organisms. And in this class, we learn about how do we classify the living organisms. That is called biological classification. So let's see, why do we have to classify things? We have to classify things to understand the complexity of the biological diversity. Like there are so many organisms present in this world. So how will you know that which organism is similar to which organism? So we classify the things according to their similarities. That is how classification began. Now let's see about the history. Aristotle and Carl Linnaeus were the two biologists who were very keen about the classification. And Aristotle was who classified the things according to the pattern of the nature of the organisms. Carl Linnaeus was known as the father of biological classification, and I'll tell you why is he known as the father of biological classification. Aristotle, he was first one to classify things, and it was widely accepted by everybody. So according to his classification, there were two types of kingdoms, or you can say two types of classification. First was plants and another is animals. So plants he classified on the basis of the size of the stem. It was herbs that has soft stems. Second is shrubs, which has little woody stems, and the trees which has only one woody stem. According to animals, for Aristotle, he classified them into on the basis of their habitat. That is where they lived, either on air, land, or water. But he could not answer the fact that why other birds, suppose if I say other air dwellers such as penguins, they could not fly. So where will he differentiate them into which category? So that was the question about his type of classification. Then came Carl Linnaeus. He was known as the father of classification because he characterized or he differentiated the biological system on the basis of physical and structural similarities. So he classified into 7 levels, that is kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. The identification and naming and the classification of species is known as taxonomy. And taxonomy has two parts, that is nomenclature and second is systematics. What I told you just now is systematics. And later on, I'll talk about nomenclature. Nomenclature is naming of the taxonomy or naming of the classification. What are the types of classification? So basically, we can differentiate into 4 types. That is artificial classification, natural classification, phylogenetic classification, and numerical taxonomy or phyletic classification. On the basis of artificial classification, it was observed in a very easy manner. They classified things, and it was basically from the ancient Chinese classification. In the natural classification, scientists classified them as an organisms according to the relationship between the organisms. So how are they related to each other? That is how they classified. Then comes the phylogenetic type of classification. They classify things according to the evolutionary relationship. So how are they related to each other? For suppose I can say chimpanzees and apes, how are they related? That is how they classify things. And the numerical taxonomy, it is how numbers are utilized for the classification. The first level of classification is kingdom. So Carl Voges gave 6 different types of kingdoms, that is archaebacteria, eubacteria, protists, fungi, animal, and plants. So the eubacteria are the oldest type of organisms. They are unicellular and prokaryotic in nature, and they are found in the hot springs environment. And then comes the eubacteria. Eubacteria are again unicellular and prokaryotic in nature. And they are the bacteria which are mainly parasites, but they are even useful for us for making the antibiotics. So he differentiated eubacteria and archaebacteria into two different kingdoms because in archaebacteria, in the cell wall, there was no peptidoglycan present. Next is protists. Protists are otherwise called as the protozoans. Then comes the fungi. Protists are multicellular or unicellular, and they are eukaryotic in nature. Eukaryotics are the ones which have nuclear membrane. All right. So the next is fungi. Fungi includes the mushroom, yeast, etc. All the other things. And it is multicellular and unicellular in nature. Then comes the plantae. All the plants you see all around you are under the plantae kingdom, and they are unicellular, eukaryotic, and autotrophic, mainly autotrophic in nature. Then comes the animalia. Animalia are again multicellular and eukaryotic, and they are the largest amongst all the kingdoms. What is a phylum? Each kingdom is subdivided into a smaller group, and that is called as phyla. So in animal kingdom, there are 10 phyla mainly, and they include Cnidaria, Mollusca, Annelida, Arthropoda, Echinodermata, and Chordata. So we come under the chordate kingdom. Sorry, phylum. What is a class? Class, when each of the phylum is subdivided into smaller groups, they are called as classes. For example, class Mammalia, and we come under Mammalia class, where we produce a young one. So what is an order? When each class is subdivided into smaller groups, they are known as orders. For example, Carnivora. What is a family? Each order is subdivided into smaller groups, that is called families. For example, Ursidae. Each family, when is subdivided into smaller groups, that is called as a genera. For example, Ursus, which is an example for bears. And the final one, what are species? Each genus is subdivided into smaller groups, which is called as species. The species is the most specific level of classification. For example, Ursus actus, which is the scientific name for a bear. So now we come under the second type of taxonomical classification, which is nomenclature, otherwise called as scientific names. So a scientific name of an organism contains two parts, that is genus and the species. First, we need to know why we have to have a scientific name. So for example, just in the picture, a cat is called by different names in different region. So we need to have a single name for this particular organism where we can identify it as a particular organism. And nobody gets confused because it is not a local name. It is scientifically written. So that is why we have to have a scientific name. There are some rules to be followed in the scientific name. Every first letter of the genus has to be in capitals, but the species name should not be in capitals. And both genus and species name have to be underlined or in italics. So if you underline the scientific name, you don't have to do italic it, and if you italic it, then you don't have to underline it. For example, humans, the scientific name is Homo sapiens. So we see the 7 level of taxonomic classification of human. Kingdom is Animalia, phylum is Chordata, class is Mammalia, order is primates, family is Hominidae, genus is Homo, and species is the sapiens. All right. So I hope you understood what I want to tell you, that the classification is very much important and you have to have idea about it. So in the next class, we'll discuss about the 5 kingdom classification and various other classification. Thank you.